Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
And welcome on in. Good morning, good evening. The phone number remains, as always, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. I am in for Gary and Eric this week. They return next Sunday night and Monday morning. I'm sure that you've noticed that the outrage meter of the Democrats, it is clearly off the charts. They're outraged about literally everything. And I got to tell you, it is a little fatiguing. I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We spoke a little bit about outrage fatigue, where if you are outraged about literally everything, well then really your outrage lacks impact. I'm going through my show sheet for this morning. By the way, follow me on the socials if you would, at Dan Mandis Show. You've got, of course, day 23 of the shutdown. The Democrats, of course, outraged over that, trying to pin that on the Democrats. The Democrats trying to pin that on the Republicans. Clearly, we know that that is a Democrat-led shutdown. And the Republicans have painted that picture and proven that narrative time and time again. So the Democrat-led shutdown does continue this morning. There is, of course, outrage over the White House ballroom. They're calling it Donald Trump's ballroom, but it is a White House ballroom. So they are outraged over that. They are outraged over the fact that Donald Trump has killed more narco-terrorists. I believe it is now the eighth drug-running boat that Donald Trump has destroyed. And, of course, yes, the Democrats are outraged over that as well. They've got, of course, the ongoing outrage over ICE in cities across America. We're going to talk about that because that is where we are going to start. There was an exchange between Scott Jennings and Ana Navarro, and I wish this were television. I wish that you could see this video. I've posted it to my social media at Dan Mandis Show. But Scott Jennings, of course, we all know Scott, and Ana Navarro, she is a leftist, and they had an exchange over whether or not ICE agents were being properly trained. That is the latest narrative from the left, that ICE agents are not being properly trained. And she threw out, of course, lobbed a couple of bombs at ICE, making a couple of claims that are actually either completely false, untrue, or lacking in evidence. This is what happened. I think this was yesterday.
Is there proper training happening here when it comes to ICE?
There's not. We've all seen it. And there should be.
You definitively state that they're not being properly trained. Do you know that?
Because they're shooting dogs. They're shooting dogs in people's that have been locked in people's bathrooms. They're abandoning small children alone in cars while they. No, it's not false. Look it up. Don't just say false.
Abandoning small children. They turned the children over to HHS.
There were actually small children abandoned in a highway in a car in Cicero, Illinois.
You make these sweeping statements that they're not training.
Would you like me
they're
to
not
get
training ICE agents. Of course
with
they go through
examples
training.
of what is happening?
Of course they're.
All right, so let's talk about, because, Scott Jennings says false, and Ana Navarro says, look it up. Don't just say false, look it up. All right, so I looked it up. You want to know the stories behind those accusations? That ICE abandoned small children on the side of a road and shot somebody's dog? So let's start with the dog story. Nobody really knows the truth yet on this story, but supposedly ICE shows up at some guy's house. Family, by the way, wants to stay anonymous, but the accusation is that ICE shows up and just shoots some dude's Rottweiler. Well, as the story goes, it was not actually ICE. Again, I looked it up per Ana Navarro's request. So it wasn't ICE. It was actually the Border Patrol. The family wants to stay anonymous. So that's another part of the story. But Border Patrol shows up at the guy's house. they were given permission to search the home. And they were warned that there was a Rottweiler in the house who tended to get aggressive with strangers. So the owner said, I'm going to put the dog in the bathroom because he could be aggressive. Now, the claim is that the Border Patrol came in, hunted down the dog, found the dog, and just shot the dog. Now, there's no evidence of this, by the way, just a claim made by an anonymous family member. Now, I looked it up on Snopes. Snopes has no idea if this is true or not. They have no idea the context with which this happened. Now, there is truth to the apparent fact that there was a use of force incident involving a canine that is now under investigation. But we don't really know what happened. I find it highly unlikely that the owner of the home and the dog put the dog in the bathroom, and then the Border Patrol just randomly came in, found the bathroom, opened the bathroom door, and shot the Rottweiler. I find that hard to believe. I don't believe that that is true. Now, what may have happened is the Rottweiler did become aggressive, and the dog was shot. That may have been what happened. But we don't really know the context. But the point is that Ana Navarro is like, oh, ICE came in and shot a dog. ICE came in and shot a dog. We have no idea. But what Scott Jennings said, and it is absolute truth, is that what she's doing is she's using anecdotes that she saw on the internet without giving any kind of perspective, without giving any kind of proper, well-researched context. It's just, ICE came in and shot a dog. Okay. Well, the dog may have become aggressive. It was a Rottweiler. The owner actually said that the Rottweiler becomes aggressive. So we don't actually know what happened. Now, did ICE abandon small children on the side of a highway in Sicily, Illinois? This was a gross misrepresentation of the facts. Of course, not surprised with Ana Navarro. But here's what happened. Because, Scott Jennings said false. Look it up, Scott. Look it up. Okay, let's look it up. A family of six family members total, they are driving in two separate cars, yes, in Sicily, Illinois. They made an illegal U-turn and they were pulled over. The mom, the dad, and an older son were taken into custody after immigration violations were discovered. A 19-year-old daughter, an adult, by the way, a 19-year-old daughter, and her two siblings, 10 and 12, were left with the adult on the side of the road with keys to both vehicles. At no time were the younger siblings abandoned by ICE. They were in the custody of the sibling, an adult, at all times. So realize that people like Ana Navarro, and it's important, if you are a conservative, I'm just going to tell you that it is open season on conservatives, whether we are talking about violence or whether we're talking about our ideas. And people like Ana Navarro, and perhaps people that you know. I know a lot of liberals, and they will throw out these anecdotes that have very little actual perspective, very little actual evidence, and no real facts behind the accusations. Just these anecdotes that they see on social media. And so they're using these viral videos as fact when the videos can be, yes, deceptively edited or just presented in a certain way to present a certain narrative. That, my friends, is a fact. And so I do love that Scott Jennings totally calls out Ana Navarro. Now, realizing the dynamic on this show with Scott Jennings is that it is him. It's, I think, Abby Phillips, I think, is the host. And you got Scott Jennings, and you've got a large circle where it's mostly, if not all, Democrats in the rest of the seats. And Jennings says you're using anecdotes as facts, and that's not fair, nor is it correct.
They're training them.
Well, they're training them, then they're not learning this stuff. They're definitely violating human rights.
They're violating human rights. Let's take that comment. The ICE agents are not going through training, but if they are going through training, they're not, quote, learning this stuff, and they are definitely violating human rights. Okay. A dog is not a human. That's number one. And number two, we also know that your story, Ana Navarro, about these kids that were supposedly left on the side of the road, that story completely fell apart when you actually looked at the truth. So I don't see where ICE is, and I'm quoting here, the air quotes are up, violating human rights. Because they're not. Does she have any evidence of ICE violating human rights? The last time I checked, what they were doing was they were enforcing the law. Here's more.
Well, I disagree with you.
Okay, well,
look, Scott, she had a specific example. Sounds like you were unfamiliar with it.
She had Abby Phillips. Memo to Abby Phillips. She had a specific example, but the specific example was either vague or untrue or remains to be seen. And I love the eye rolling of the people at the table, because there's a lot of eye rolling. You had Ana Navarro, you had Abby Phillip, you had others at the table. The weird guy with the white hair and the bad teeth, he was there. He was eye rolling. Everybody's eye rolling at Scott Jennings, and it turns out, upon further investigation, Jennings was absolutely right.
I'm not aware of her example. Here's what I know.
Okay, so
under Joe Biden, they didn't enforce federal immigration law. Now we do. We're having hundreds of thousands of interactions.
My point is that
things will happen, but she said they are not training them. She said they're not training.
Do you think that trained
She was saying a specific example, and you said it was false.
She said, quote, they're not training them.
You just acknowledge that you don't know what she was referring to.
I don't.
Well, and here's the thing. I don't know why Abby Phillip is saying an eye rolling. You can hear the eye roll in her voice. Well, Scott, she was quoting specific examples, and it sounds like you weren't aware of the specific examples. And Scott's like, no. I'm not aware of these, and I'm, again, air quoting, specific examples, because these specific examples have been taken completely out of context, or they are literally based in lies. So I'm not entirely certain why it is that Abby Phillips is like, she's got specific examples. We can all cite specific. I would say this. If I was at that table, Lord help me, I would say to Ana Navarro, and I would say to Abby Phillips, I would say, okay, listen, she brought her specific examples. Can we use my specific examples and start going through all of the really, really bad guys, the illegal aliens that ICE has been able to arrest and deport? Because there is no obfuscation of the truth there. These are facts that they have arrested and deported guys who are murderers in other countries. They are rapists. They have done horrific things. So we can all bring our specific examples to the table. But that seems to trigger the Democrats.
Do you think that scooping up U.S. citizens without giving them...
I disagree with the generalization that they're scooping up U.S. citizens.
There's 170 that have been scooped up.
Well, there's over 500,000 illegal aliens that have been deported.
There's little children that have been scooped up that are U.S. citizens.
All right, look,
I know, you don't want the law enforced. I get it. You don't have to yell at me. You don't want the law.
So there you go. That's what Scott Jennings was going through tonight. Red Eye Radio, the phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Meantime, in Los Angeles, they have now announced, this was earlier this week, they have now announced a master ICE tracker is about to be unleashed on the members of the law enforcement community.
I shared this with the mayor. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, the Oversight Committee will be launching on their website a master ICE tracker where we're going to be essentially tracking every single instance that we can verify that the community will be able to send us information on.
Yeah, this is going to be a very big deal, and it's going to be a very big deal for members of ICE because their lives are on the line, and this is going to put a target on their backs. We're going to talk about that next. My name is Dan Mandis right here on Red Eye Radio.
Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at J.J. Keller. At a roadside inspection, inspectors may ask to see supporting documents. The document generated or received by a motor carrier in the normal course of business that can be used by law enforcement to verify a driver's logs. These documents can include bills of lading, itineraries, schedules, or equivalent documents that indicate the origin and destination of each trip. They can also include dispatch or trip records, expense receipts related to on-duty/not driving periods, electronic mobile communication transmitted through a fleet management system, and payroll records, settlement sheets, or equivalent documents that indicate payment to a driver. Drivers using paper logs must also keep toll receipts. Supporting documents must contain the driver's name, carrier-assigned identification number, or vehicle unit number that can be linked to the driver, the date, the name of the nearest city, town, or village, and the time. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller & Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
Red Eye Radio, the phone number 866-90-RED-EYE. By the way, I have activated the super text line, which is what we call it here in Nashville, where I host a morning show. So if you can't call in, text in, and already getting a lot of great text messages. That number is 615-737-9986, 615-737-9986. If you hear something and you want to make a comment, go ahead and text it in. I try to read all of them, although I am unable to respond to all of them just because I get so many, especially when I'm on nationally. But I'm talking about this.
I shared this with the mayor. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, the Oversight Committee will be launching on their website a master ICE tracker where we're going to be essentially tracking every single instance that we can verify that the community will be able to send us information on.
Yeah, so basically this is going to be at the federal level. It's going to be an online database that Democrats are going to use to monitor, track, and it looks like warn communities where ICE is. Now, this will continue to put ICE agents at risk, and so between this and the demands that ICE agents be unmasked, it is clear that Democrats have absolutely no problem putting ICE agents at risk. And also, let's not forget, and I hope that you haven't, let's not forget that ICE has bounties on their heads by the drug cartels. That's right. $2,000 for intelligence gathering on agents and doxing info, $5,000 for non-lethal assault and kidnapping of ICE agents, and up to $50,000 for taking out senior leaders. And yet the Democrats, they want ICE agents unmasked, and they want their movements tracked. Now, just so we're clear, I am all for transparency. I'm all for transparency. We do need to know what law enforcement is doing nationally, of course, and locally and whatever. But the problem that I have is that right now these agents are literally in danger. They are operating under dangerous conditions. Again, they've got bounties on their heads. They've got local politicians that are exposing their every moves and letting people know exactly where they are. So if you're a bad guy and you want to take out ICE, you know exactly where they are. You know what their movements are. Coming up after the break, I'm going to play some great audio, great audio from Stephen Miller. And Stephen Miller is going to talk about how the Democrats have enough blood on their hands, but apparently they want even more. Details straight ahead on Red Eye Radio.
Red Eye Radio. from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90 Red Eye, 866-907-3339. I just discovered this audio bite talking about ICE and everything that is going on in cities all across America. You've got, as I've been explaining, you have the Democrats in Washington, D.C., and basically Democrats in these major cities where ICE has gone and additional law enforcement has gone, where you have Democrats in those cities tracking ICE agents and effectively, letting the bad guys like the drug dealers and the drug cartels who have bounties on the heads of members of ICE know exactly where they are and know their every movement. Now, this was in Los Angeles, where the headline is Los Angeles teacher, guy by the name of Ron Gachez, is a teacher at a local high school. And it sounds to me, and maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like he is calling for violence against ICE.
This is South Central Los Angeles. They are not the only ones with guns in this city.
Wow. They are not the only ones with guns in this city. I mean, I don't know. I am but a humble talk show host. But it sounds like dude is asking or encouraging for violence. Now, let's see what else he says.
They're not the only ones, and don't forget that. And I don't say that because we're calling for violence. I'm saying that because the people have every right to defend themselves against masked, unidentified gunmen with AR-15s and other military rifles. The people have every right to defend themselves. That's not violent, that's intelligent, as Brother Malcolm once said.
Okay. Yeah, but if they're either picking you up on a warrant, if they're picking you up because you're violating, federal or state law, well, okay, then if you choose to shoot at a law enforcement officer, you better be a good shot, because I happen to know that they are, with all of that training that Ana Navarro claims that they're not getting. So this is what's going on. And so that's why I say that it is absolutely insane for the Democrats to advocate for and put into place this online database that is going to track ICE. I think it's crazy. We've had the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, not once but twice. He got shot in the head, of course, as you know. We all know what happened to Charlie Kirk. And so when Stephen Miller starts talking about the Democrats and blood on their hands, it's like, how much? My question would be this. How much blood do they want?
You have Democrats in New York City, for example, encouraging the rioters who are assaulting ICE officers, removing criminal aliens from their communities. You have Democrats trying to create tracking apps to tell the criminals, the fugitives, the rapists, the killers, the cartel members where and when ICE is going to be. You have Governor Pritzker trying to get ICE out of his city to protect illegal alien monsters who are committing crimes against children, against women, instead of protecting American citizens. This is a party that has embraced full-scale insurrection against the laws of the United States. You look at that arrest in Canal Street, for example, those 9 individuals, all illegal immigrants from Africa, almost all of whom were released into the country by the Biden administration. Mm-hmm. You have among them dozens of arrests, forgery, counterfeiting, drug dealing, narcotics trafficking, assault, battery, theft, domestic violence. And Democrats are saying these illegal aliens caught and released by the Biden administration not only should stay in our country, but they'll violently attack any federal officer who tries to remove them. And then more breaking news reported out by Fox's own Bill Maloogian. 3 people just died in California, killed by an illegal alien on the road driving a semi-truck that was allowed into the country, caught and released by Joe Biden, and put on the road by Gavin Newsom. How much more blood has to be spilled by Democrats, Sean, before this madness stops?
All right, so that is Stephen Miller. I got to tell you, these illegal alien truck drivers, this is what he was talking about. Per Bill Malusian, and I've been covering the illegal alien truck drivers. Basically what's happening is you have these guys that come into our country, and they may be from wherever it might be. But they come into our country, and they go to California. I've told you about this before. They go to California. They get their driver's license. Then they go to these truck driving schools that effectively give these illiterate, even in their own country, these illiterate truck drivers who can't read, they can't speak English, and they put them behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler. Give them a commercial driver's license, and off they go in an 18-wheeler. Can't read the road signs, right? Can't read the road signs. Can't speak English. Have no flipping clue as to what's going on or where they're going, yet they have control of an 18-wheeler. And time after time after time after time, we see these guys and they kill Americans. Breaking, per multiple ICE sources, dude's name is Jashanpreet Singh. Now, here's the interesting thing. And I don't know what it is, and maybe somebody out there knows. The text line that I use locally is available for you nationally. If you want to check in with me, if you can't call in, text in 615-737-9986. But this last name of Singh, whenever you see these guys with these, these driver's licenses, and they end up killing Americans, their last name always seems to be Singh. S-I-N-G-H. And maybe there might be, some variation of that last name, but I don't know if that is a last name that is used by these truck driving schools so that they can give these guys truck driver licenses, commercial driver's license. And who knows what this guy's actual real identity is. So I don't know if his last name really is Singh, but it seems like there's a lot of these guys named Singh. And then they do more research and they realize, oh, well, his name isn't actually Singh. It's like something else. But this guy was drunk behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler, and he has killed 3 people on the 10 freeway. That's going to be the San Bernardino Freeway in Ontario, California. He is an Indian illegal alien who was caught and released at the California border by the Biden administration in March of 2022. I mean, that is so frustrating. So you have the Democrats. It's interesting. The Democrats are calling for the monitoring and the tracking of ICE agents, right? That's where I started this hour. Yet they apparently have absolutely no problem with all of these drunken Indians who are behind the wheel of 18-wheelers and killing Americans. Because this has happened often. Bill Malusian, I'm told ICE is placing a detainer request on this guy, Jashanpreet Singh, with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, where he is in custody on suspicion of DUI, causing great bodily injury and gross vehicular manslaughter while intoxicated. He has not yet been formally charged. Police say Singh was speeding and under the influence, never hitting. The video of this, by the way, is awful. Never hitting his brakes when he crashed into slow-moving traffic on the freeway. Again, I-10, San Bernardino Freeway there in California, causing a devastating and deadly chain reaction crash that killed 3 people. The victims have not yet been identified. So, when Stephen Miller says the Democrats have all of this blood on their hands, how much more do they want? It seems like they just don't care. Apparently, this happened yesterday, October 22nd of 2025. And Bill Malusian posted this I guess last night. But we've seen this time and again. So when you hear the Democrats and they're talking about, the ICE agents are disappearing people and all of these kinds of things, which most of the time that's BS. But can we talk about what disappearing, and I'm air quoting that, can we talk about what disappearing actually is? You know the 3 people that Jashanpreet Singh killed? That's disappearing people. Permanently. That's what that is. So if the Democrats want to talk about disappearing people, we can talk about that all day long. How many young American women have been raped and killed by illegal aliens? Rachel Marine is one. We all know the names. But the Democrats don't want to talk about the permanent disappearing of those women. They just want to talk about illegal alien gang members who are supposedly being disappeared off the streets of America. But again, they don't want to talk about the disappearing of American citizens permanently at the hands of illegal alien gang members or drunken illegal alien Indian truck drivers who are given driver's licenses and commercial driver's licenses in Gavin Newsom's California. Unbelievable. That's why I say you talk about the blood on the hands of Democrats via any number of avenues, whether it is Joe Biden's open border, whether it is the commercial driver's licenses given to these illegal aliens who get driver's licenses so that they can drive these trucks. It goes on and on. The phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. You can also text in to the radio show tonight, 615-737-9986. If you can't call in, text in. We'll return next on Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye Radio, the phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. If you can't call in, you can text in tonight, 615-737-9986. And I'm reading through all the text messages. Very much appreciated. And this is Eduardo calling from Tampa Bay, Florida on Red Eye Radio. Eduardo, how are you?
Yeah, Dan, we've spoken before. I used to live in Chicago. And speaking of Chicago, so the Secretary of State, Alex Julenius, wants people to notify his office of invalid plates. Kind of a similar story to what you're talking about in California of vehicles on ice.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty ridiculous. And I got to tell you, because you mentioned this in the opening monologue, Tren de Agua, which belongs to Venezuela, I totally support the president and hopefully not shock and awe, but we can remove Mr. Maduro and this Machado, Nobel Peace Winner, or Gonzalez, who's the other person, can get in there and lead Venezuela to a better life in the future.
Are you, hey, Eduardo, are you from Venezuela or no? Where are you from?
No, I'm from, I was born in Chicago, but my parents are from Mexico, but I've been watching the Spanish station, Telemundo Univision, and that's been getting very heavy coverage because everybody else is on Middle East and Ukraine. So
right.
That's in the shadows. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's going to be interesting in Venezuela because, you know, I'm just going to be honest. I'm not a big fan of regime change because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
but
that makes sense.
But I will say this, that I do find it interesting. The left is hyperventilating over Trump taking out these drug boats coming from Venezuela. But, you know, the reality is that why would we not save American lives by taking out the drug boats before the drugs get here? Donald Trump was absolutely right.
Heaven forbid the Democrats get back in power, because that Darien Pass where the caravans came through, that's coming back because the Panamanian military is not going to be putting troops there. So we have a chance here in the next 3 years to do this because I'm not leaving this stuff for the Democrats.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. And Eduardo, I appreciate the call. And Eduardo is absolutely right on a number of things. So, again, I'm not a big fan of regime change because sometimes what is ultimately waiting after the ousted dictator sometimes can be even worse. But besides all that, the drugs are being manufactured in Colombia, in Mexico. Ingredients are coming from China, and Venezuela is helping to traffic them all across the world, and certainly here into America. I have absolutely no problem with taking out the drug boats. Maduro, we know that he's scared. We'll have to see where that whole thing goes. My name is Dan Mandis. This is Red Eye Radio.
Top of the Hour News is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
And the phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. I appreciate you listening, and if you can't call in, you can always text in. Tonight, I'm using my text line that I use for my local show in Nashville, Tennessee. That phone number that you can text is 615-737-9986. I was talking in the previous hour about how the Democrats, they seem to be outraged over everything, and oftentimes they utilize either anecdotal evidence or just flat-out lies to further that outrage. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the presidential ballroom, Donald Trump's ballroom. But I liked what 4889 had to say out of the state of Georgia. You ready? Says, if you are outraged by everything, you are the problem. If you are offended by everything, you are the offensive one. Just like a bratty 2-year-old, if you let him scream and cry long enough, they will finally cry themselves to sleep. And that is exactly what we are dealing with when it comes to the Democrat Party. And I believe that 4899 has a very good point, because at some point, you just roll your eyes and you stop listening. You know, it's like if you have an angry spouse or whatever, or an angry parent, whatever, and they're always, just snipping at you, just always complaining. At some point, you just stop listening. Because if you have nothing productive to offer and all you ever do is complain, well, then people are going to stop listening. And I think that's where we are with the Democrats. They're in this, you've heard of this circular firing squad. It's like they're in this circular outrage echo chamber where everybody is just talking about their outrage and what they're outraged over today or this hour or this minute or this second. Every day, it's another thing that they're outraged over. Like the presidential ballroom. President Trump, of course, as you know, he is very excited about the presidential ballroom, and this is something that he's wanted to do for a long time. And like everything else, the left is going nuts on this. It is insane. This was President Trump a few days ago when he was describing what it is that he wants to do with this presidential ballroom.
And the ballroom's going to be beautiful. So you'll have drinks, cocktails, everything on this floor. And then they'll say, welcome to dinner. You walk into the ballroom, Mr. Senators, and you're going to see a ballroom the likes of which I don't think it'll be topped. It'll be the finest. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I just started.
Yeah. I mean, listen, he's excited about it. And he has admitted now that there's no taxpayer dollars that are going to this. Donald Trump himself is paying for this ballroom along with some donors. But as usual, we have Democrats screaming about this. You have the the photos of the East Wing of the White House being decimated. They've got, I don't know what it is that they use to destroy buildings with cranes and so forth. And so the left, they're screaming about it. They're screaming about everything. Here's what Donald Trump said about this ballroom the other day, about the integrity of the ballroom and its literal connection to the White House.
It won't interfere with the current building. It'll be near it, but not touching it, and pays total respect to the existing building, which I'm the biggest fan of. It's my favorite. So that ultimately there's some confusion as to whether or not it is actually now touching the building. There's some audio that I'm going to play here in a little bit that addresses that. We don't really know exactly what's going on with the construction, but other parts of the East Wing have been demolished to make way for this huge ballroom. Some people have said, just to let you know that I know, some people have said online that what has been demolished is a carport. As far as I can tell, that's not the case. As far as I can tell, there's some offices. There is, some offices affiliated with the First Lady that have now had to be, number one, removed, and then they've been, sent somewhere else in the White House. But, the East Wing has been called utilitarian in nature. In other words, it's like the First Lady's offices and some other random various offices as well. And Trump decided, you know what, we are going to put a ballroom, that past presidents have actually expressed outrage and frustration and some concerns that they really don't have a large, elegant ballroom to have, parties and honor, guests and that kind of a thing. Well, this solves that problem. I mean, this ballroom is going to be 90,000 square feet and can accommodate about 1,000 people. So you can have state dinners there. You can have awards ceremonies and all kinds of events. And, of course, the ladies on The View are freaking out, as they always do.
You know who is still bulldozing ahead with building a White House ballroom that no one voted for, no one asked for? That is not your building.
Correct.
You don't own that building. It would be like me going over to Trump Tower and saying I'm going to build a disco. They've wanted a disco in Trump Tower for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And so, come on, man. You don't own that building. That is the people's building. You don't own it.
All right. So, as usual, Whoopi Goldberg is way off base. Now, first of all, memo to Whoopi Goldberg. If you're going to go over to Trump Tower and you're going to try to put up a disco, that's a silly comparison. Because Donald Trump is the owner of Trump Tower, period. Now, second of all, she is actually right. Donald Trump does not own the White House, but the president does have the authority to upgrade the White House as he sees fit. There's a couple of committees that are usually consulted with things like this. One example is the Committee for the Preservation of the White House, and they have been consulted. But it does seem, from what I can tell, the president does have the ultimate authority. And I would say to Whoopi Goldberg and the so-called ladies on The View, like it or not, that's the way it's written. That's the way the law is written. So here's what I'm curious about. Eventually, there will be a Democrat back in the White House. Eventually. You think that when they get in, they're going to tear down the ballroom simply because this is something that Donald Trump built? It wouldn't surprise me. Because Donald Trump does have the authority to build it. And a future president would also have the authority to tear it down.
You don't own it. You cannot take it down. You don't own it. Take your behind to another town.
All right. So right now, the White House has the South Lawn. They have a temporary pavilion they use on occasion. They have the small East Room dining room. It's a stateroom dining room, as a matter of fact. They have the East Room, a building in the East Room, like a room that they have events in. They've got the stateroom, dining room as well. Both of those, by the way, they can fit around 200 people. Remember, Trump's new ballroom, almost 1,000, 999. All right, whatever. But the East Room was only about 200, and the stateroom dining room only about 200 as well. Now, the East Room has now been demolished because they're making room for the new ballroom. But if they had anything bigger, and by the way, that's not even talking about, the 200 in the stateroom dining room or the 200 in the East Room. When you start talking about putting tables in there, then the capacity goes down. So anything bigger than, 79, 80, 100 people with tables, they would have to go off site. And when you go off site, well, guess what? You've got to deal with Secret Service concerns, security concerns, all of that. So it actually does make sense for President Trump to build this ballroom, and the fact that this doesn't take any, federal tax dollars makes it even better. And so one thing that the president is being criticized is for that comment I played for you a few minutes ago, where Trump said that he was not going to touch the current White House. He said, among other things, well, listen, stuff happens, things change, but also this is kind of sort of fake news. And it's interesting. When the president talks about this, when the president talks about what is going to happen with the ballroom, he is talking about, and it is true, he is talking about the fact that, yes, other presidents have asked for bigger ballrooms. They've said, listen, it is far too small. The stateroom and the East Room, they're far too small. And you know what the reality is? The reality is that the White House has a space problem. I mean, you talk about the White House press room. Very, where they do the press briefings, very small, very cramped. So there's actually not a lot of room in the White House.
We determined that after really a tremendous amount of study with some of the best architects in the world, we determined that really knocking it down, trying to use a little section, in order to do it properly, we had to take down the existing structure. The way it was shown, it looked like we were touching the White House. We don't touch the White House. That's a bridge, a glass bridge, going from the White House to the ballroom. Mm-hmm. Then you get into the lobby of the ballroom, and then you go into the the main room. And it's something that has gotten incredible reviews.
All right, so I don't really know. I'm listened to that clip 3 times. So it sounds like, on the one hand, President Trump is saying that they didn't want to touch the existing White House, but then ultimately they realized that they had to. But then later on in the same clip, he says that we're not really touching the current structure of the White House. But I mean, it does look like, if you look at the photos and the cranes and all that, it does look like parts of the East Room have been demolished. And here's the deal. I don't care if you demolish part of the East Room. I mean, listen, they said, I just told you, and you just read reports on it, that this area of the White House has always been very utilitarian. Again, a bunch of random offices in there, including the First Ladies. And I believe that they will, and the White House does need a really grand ballroom. And President Trump has said that past presidents have expressed frustration that the White House has these space constraints. JFK was one of them. Roosevelt was another, where they talked about the space constraints for large-scale entertaining. I do find it interesting, too, that the left is screaming about all of this, and they seem to forget that there was some reconstruction back in 2010 as well.
Sounds like they're building another wing to the White House.
It's going to happen for the next 2 years. All of the banging, the jackhammering, the dust, the confusion, the noise of all places to do construction is happening right here, the front lawn of the White House.
It's a 4-year renovation project. Estimated cost, $376 million.
All right, so that was what, Barack Obama did back in 2010. So here's the thing. The White House, people have long said it needs a ballroom where they can have proper events. So at the end of the day, you could say that the government is saving money. And here's what I mean by that. If they've got to go off-site for a 1,000-person event, then they have to rent that space, do they not? Yeah, they have to rent that space. If there's an existing ballroom at the White House and it's elegant and it's everything that they need to do this kind of an event, then that is going to be rent-free, right? It'll be rent-free. That's number one. And number two, you're going to save on additional security, I'm assuming. And so it just, to me, makes sense. And also, because no federal funds are being spent on this, it's being paid for by Donald Trump and his donor friends. Well, then, at least to me, this is an instance where the Democrats, the ladies on The View, yes, some Republicans as well, they are angry and outraged for all the wrong reasons. The phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. If you can't call in, you can text in tonight, 615-737-9986. Got a lot more straight ahead.
This morning's USDA Farm Report is brought to you by House Products. Tested, trusted, guaranteed since 1920.
Do you prepare smoked meats like ribs, brisket, or pulled pork? USDA food safety expert Meredith Carruthers says there are some tips for you to know to keep food safe from foodborne bacteria. First,
starting with a clean smoker, a lot of food particles get charred and onto the grates, making sure you're scraping off those bits before you put new ones on there.
Marinate or brine your meats before smoking them. Carruthers points out a couple of food safety considerations.
It's just possible for juices from the raw meat and poultry to kind of splatter around your kitchen or to get other places. So cleaning as you go and sanitizing after to make sure those surfaces are clean. As you marinate those items, they can go in the fridge for 1 to 2 days usually.
Using a Ziploc freezer bag both for storage and refrigeration of marinating meats and transporting from the fridge to the smoker is one way to prevent spillage of juices and avoid cross-contamination. I'm Ron Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This report brought to you by Cenex Fuels and Lubes.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. I was talking very quickly about the demolition of the East Wing of the White House and how the left is just horrified at what is happening. I love what Josh Hawley said to Manu Raju over there at CNN. Listen.
What about just uprooting this is an iconic building?
Manu, I will just say this. I made this point yesterday, that I hear all of a sudden from my liberal friends that they're very concerned about our history. Really, these are the same people who tore down every statue they could get their hands on in the last 4 years. Christopher Columbus, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt. They didn't have any concern for history then. Now all of a sudden, like, the facade of the East Wing is iconic. Oh, give me a break. Give me a break.
Man, he is so spot on. This is Jim in Naperville, Illinois on Red Eye Radio. Jim, how are you? Thanks for holding on. Oh, is Jim gone? All right, Jim's gone. Let's say hello to Greg very quickly in Tallahassee, Florida on Red Eye. Hey, Greg. Oh, good Lord. Okay, everybody's gone. That's fine. Because you know what? I like the text messages that I'm getting here as well. You can text the show, 615-737-9986. 9723 says, why does everybody talk about The View? I'm going to tell you why I talk about The View, because I get this often. And I think that the reason why I utilize The View and their audio is because what they do is they personify where the left is. They personify the talking points of the left. And that's kind of where a lot of the American people are. And so if people like me, because I get attacked about this all the time, which is fine. But if people like me don't point out either the hypocrisy of The View, if I don't point out where they're wrong factually or, from a reasonable thinking standpoint on The View, well, then nobody will. If it's not for talk radio, then people will just, listen to The View and take that in and think that these ladies are making sense. It's the same with Ana Navarro over on CNN when I was talking about, that battle that she had with Scott Jennings in the first hour. If you missed it, please go listen to it on the podcast, because what Ana Navarro was talking about and what she was spewing was actually lies and falsehoods. But people listen to it and think that just because it's on CNN, it's some sort of fact, and it is not. More of your calls coming up next on Red Eye Radio.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. I'm going to take a call from Jim here in a second, but just to let you know where I'm going in this segment, we have had more calls for violence against Donald Trump and the Republicans, ICE as well.
I'm not going to punch you back in your face. I'm going to go across your neck.
All right, so that's good. Let's talk to Jim real quick, though, in Naperville, Illinois on Red Eye Radio. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing great, Dan. Not to mention all the renovations on the White House by Truman and Ford and Taft back in the day. But that's a separate thing. But the thing is, perhaps the Democrats, we need to pull their federal protection services, like for Chuck Schumer. You know what I mean? And how about the U.S. Marshal Service? Why don't we track those guys? I mean, why don't we so that we know exactly where Chuck Schumer's protection service is going, their logistics. How about all the federal marshals, so that we know who's sitting on what plane?
Well, Jim, you bring up a great point, and I appreciate the call. And of course, part of the conversation tonight has been that you have, and I covered this previously in the show, where you have these Democrats, and knowing full well, and this is what Jim was responding to, knowing full well that ICE has bounties on their heads, we now have Democrats who are starting this basically it's a mass surveillance program for ICE all across the country. And they're going to be warning people in these, various Democrat-run cities where ICE is, and again, knowing full well that they have bounties on their heads from the drug dealers. We talked about that earlier. But I got to tell you, I agree with Stephen Miller when he says, how much blood can the Democrats actually have on their hands? I mean, I want you to think about this comment.
I'm not going to punch you back in your face. I'm going to go across your neck.
All right, so we've had 2 assassination attempts, the murder of Charlie Kirk, and the celebrations, of course, regarding the murder of Charlie Kirk. But that's not enough for the Democrats. That is Texas State Representative Jolanda Jones. And as she was saying that to Aaron Burnett on CNN, she made a slashing motion across her neck. Now, these folks, I don't think that they're going to be happy until Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and everyone else they disagree with is taken out. And I do understand that that sounds extreme, but this language that this Texas State Representative Jolanda Jones, the language that she is using seems to indicate that. Listen to her entire statement.
I'm from the hood, okay? So when a bully comes, if there are no rules, you literally have to figure it out. So Donald Trump has changed things, and people trying to do what's always been done is not going to work. And I think that's why Democrats are losing black people. That's why they're losing poor people, because poor people, all they want is for us to fight. So if you hit me in my face, I'm not going to punch you back in your face. I'm going to go across your neck because we can go back and forth fighting in each other's faces. You've got to hit hard enough where they won't come back. And so, for the same way I went to New York and spoke with Governor Kathy Hochul and said, if they're going to try to wipe us out in Texas, we need to wipe out every Republican in New York, in California, in Illinois. No, it absolutely doesn't work.
All right, so there you go. That is State Representative Jolanda Jones out there in Texas. You folks listening to WBAP, do you know her? That's the only soundbite that I've ever heard of this woman. And honestly, I feel like I know her pretty well based on that one statement. And to be honest, it's getting old calling this out every morning. I have a talk show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 99.7. I host a morning show 6 to 10 Eastern Time, 5 to 9 Central, where I call this kind of stuff out every single morning because honestly, nobody seems to care in the mainstream media that people like Jolanda Jones are out there calling for violence against conservative. But I do believe that America is divided right now, and I think, and I want you to, I want you to listen very close to what I'm about to say. America is divided right now, and I think that that's a good thing. Here's what I mean by that. We have an infinite number of examples of how the Democrats are embracing violence, embracing racism, embracing this advocacy for violence. I couldn't tell you the last time that I actually heard a Democrat come up with an idea on how to fix issues in this country. It is all about this extremist attitude with a healthy dose of lies. I mean, I've got some examples. The No Kings rallies, right? Based on a lie, right? Donald Trump is not a king no more. You know, people talk about Donald Trump and, oh, he thinks he's a king. Clearly, he's not a king. And everybody knows that. That's why the No Kings rallies were simply asinine. Again, based on a lie. Yet they took to the streets with a silly narrative to try and convince the masses that Donald Trump believes that he is a king and is going to do all he can to stay in power. All right? Well, then why is J.D. Vance clearly being groomed? It's an honest question. They have an app now that they're heavily promoting to, again, let people know where ICE is at times. Considering that you have calls for ICE to be taken out, that is clearly dangerous. So when I talk about how the left has this extremist attitude with a healthy dose of lies, that's what I mean. Extremist. Rachel Maddow, of course, you know she's over there on MSNBC. Rachel Maddow is now out there saying some of the most ridiculous things about the Republican Party. Wait for it. Wanting to go back to Jim Crow.
What we've got right now, what the movement is right now that Americans on the other side are up against is a movement that is deathly afraid of the fact that there is no longer going to be a white majority in this country within 20 years. They want to guarantee all white rule and to the extent they can, one party rule in this country in a way that is impervious to those democratic changes. They do not want people who are not white and people who are not on their side of the issues to have a shot at political power anymore. This is not a new idea. This is not some innovation of the 21st century. This is simply a return to the kind of politics that kept Jim Crow in force.
Uh-huh. Right. Isn't that weird? I want you to think about this. She says that the Republicans want all white rule. Right? Isn't that what she said?
They do not want people who are not white and people who are not on their side of the issues to have a shot at political power anymore.
So Republicans don't want black people to have power. Is that it? Is that what she's saying? Because I'm pretty certain that Donald Trump has endorsed a black man to be governor of Virginia. Or why did he give a black man the Presidential Medal of Freedom? Or had that black man as part of his administration? In other words, she's just talking stupidity and nonsense. But these are talking points of the left. And I love that part where she says that Republicans, they don't want black people to have a shot at political power. Can you imagine? I want you to think about this. Can you imagine how much more political power the Democrats would have if they didn't advocate for abortion? That they didn't push so hard for more and more abortions? Think about that. Because it's true. One of the other things that she said, and it's a little ridiculous, let me touch on this part just real quickly.
They do not want people who are not white and people who are not on their side of the issues to have a shot at political power anymore.
Okay, well, that second part is kind of silly, where she says that Republicans don't want people who are on their side of the issues to have political power. Isn't that politics? I mean, doesn't that define the Democrat Party as well? I mean, obviously, we have the left and the right, and we see things very differently. And so Rachel Maddow is right. As a conservative, I don't want people who are Democrats to have political power. Oh, you caught me. Guilty as charged. Rachel Maddow. But so are they. But they've also been calling for and celebrating political violence against Republicans. So to me, this is like the same old talking points, isn't it? I mean, isn't this the same old talking points? Oh, Republicans are racist. Oh, Republicans are trying to steal elections. Oh, Republicans are trying to keep the black man down. I mean, all of this is very standard fare for the Democrats.
I think the Trump administration, people who are working for him, know what they're trying to do. I think they are trying to impose one party permanent rule, getting rid of American democracy and all for all intents and purposes, and having an authoritarian takeover of the country. Like I think they know what they're doing.
All right, so you've got all of these very nasty allegations, and I, for one, again, get tired of having to knock these down every day. But it's weird, just a little perspective from the sky is falling Democrats. This is the same type of stuff we heard back in 2021 when Georgia implemented common sense voting reforms that tightened up the elections. Remember that whole thing? Made the elections more secure out there in Georgia? Of course, Democrats used this same type of rhetoric you just heard from Rachel Maddow, that these laws would restrict voting rights for black people, like absentee voting and all the rest of it. Well, it turns out in Georgia, none of that was true. It turns out that they had massive voting that year with a record number of black people turning out to vote. The Democrats caught in a lie. And so when I say, as I said a few minutes ago, when I say, you know what, I'm okay with being divided with the Democrats. I'm okay with being divided from a political party that, number one, lies about what it is that we stand for. I don't want to join with that organization or with that political party. Do you? No. Anybody who says, oh, we just have to be united. Are you flipping kidding me? Shut up. There's no united with the other side who is celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk, who celebrate the assassination attempts on Donald Trump, and is perpetually calling us racists. You remember, just staying with this narrative of Georgia, they lost the All-Star game back in 2021. Thanks for that kind of rhetoric from Rachel Maddow and people like her, Stacey Abrams as well. The high-pressure campaign of Stacey Abrams and other leftists that cost Georgia millions of dollars when they moved the All-Star game to Denver. By the way, that law is still in place in Georgia, but if I'm not mistaken, the All-Star game was in Atlanta here in 2025. Law's still there, but they moved the All-Star game back to Atlanta. I think they realized that they were played. Major League Baseball realizes that they were played. Got a lot more straight ahead. The phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE. If you can't call in, text in 615-737-9986. Got a lot more straight ahead on Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. If you can't call in, text in A lot of text messages tonight. Thank you. 615-737-9986. Tom is calling from San Diego on Red Eye Radio. Tom, how are you?
I'm all right, Dan. I have a problem with these people calling for acts of violence. And if you look at 18 U.S.C. U.S. Code 373, the title of it is solicitation to commit a crime of violence. And it makes it a felony to do what they're doing. And I don't understand why the DOJ is not putting these people in handcuffs and putting them in prison where they belong.
Well, Tom, I appreciate. I get it, and I appreciate the call. I think part of what they're doing is they are the Democrats. They're leaving just enough room where they have like plausible deniability. I mean, let me play this audio bite real quick. This is what the that call from Tom was just based on. This Jolanda Jones. Now, I said she was from Dallas. Apparently, she's from the Houston area. But this is what she said.
I'm from the hood, okay? So when a bully comes, like, if there are no rules, you literally have to figure it out. So Donald Trump has changed things, and people trying to do what's always been done is not going to work. And I think that's why Democrats are losing black people. That's why they're losing poor people, because...
Yep, all right, we will have a lot more on that straight ahead. Dan Mandis here, Red Eye Radio.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.